My name is Jesse, and I work with small businesses in the government marketplace. You're listening to FedBiz 5, where you get informed, get connected, and get results on everything government contracting. Hello, and welcome to another episode of FedBiz 5. Today's topic, should my small business respond to a sources sought or RFI? Senior Contract Specialist Frank is on. Welcome, Frank.
Well, thanks, Jesse. It's good to be back with you and our listeners.
Absolutely. To begin on whether a small business should respond, could you explain the difference between a sources sought and RFI?
So technically, according to the Federal Acquisition Regulations, a sources sought from a federal agency is where that agency has clear requirements. And what they're attempting to do is make a determination if they should set aside the contract for small businesses or even further define it to a socio-economic category of small business, such as woman-owned or service-disabled veteran-owned business. So they are trying to determine if small businesses can handle a project of this defined size and scope. So typically, they're wanting to use a set-aside, but want assurances from the industry during this process that small businesses can complete the project or contract. Whereas a request for information, or RFI, is where the government is seeking assistance from the business community on defining the specific requirements. These typically involve the government stating their need and wanting to hear from the industry on how the vendors would propose achieving the end result. This data is used to define the specific requirements for the statement of work or the performance work statement when they release their RFP. Now, Jesse, in reality, the government very often either confuses these two items or combine parts of both into one request. So in my mind, whether it is a sources sought or a request for information, they're interchangeable and should be addressed the same.
Okay, good to know. So should a small business respond to either of these government requests?
Well, the simple answer to that question is yes. However, I'm going to preface that answer to a degree and give you reasons why, in most cases, the answer is yes. First, you always want to respond if the RFI or sources sought falls within your primary or secondary core competency. Now, we all have more than one core competency, and many firms have anywhere from 6 to 12. However, we all have a primary competency and a competency that is a close second. So if the request does not fall within one of these two competencies, you really do not want to waste your time, as you'll be fighting an uphill battle against companies that are more closely aligned with the request. The only caveat is when the request is from your one primary targeted agency. You may recall, in an earlier podcast, I informed small businesses to focus on one, but never more than two targeted agencies that you are a good fit for and that you want to work in. Well, if there is an opportunity in one of your targeted agencies, prepare a reply if that work is in an area that you can perform. But if it is not in one of your targeted agencies, make sure the work is in one of your top two core competencies. The primary reason that I say in one of your top two is that to prepare a quality response, you need time. And one way you can save time is to reuse sections from prior responses. For those in your primary competencies, this should equate to 75% or more of this response, since the response should focus primarily on your performance in that competency. Why write a response from scratch whenever you have a prior response that you can pull sections from to make it easier and quicker to respond? In fact, I recommend developing a set of standard paragraphs around your primary competencies, as these can be used over and over in responses, not just to RFIs and sources sought, but to actual RFPs, and when reaching out to new prospective clients, whether government or commercial. So before I get into the reasons why you want to respond, I want to be clear. Only respond to those requests in your top one or two competencies or a request from a targeted agency.
That makes sense, as a small business must watch their resources, and getting spread too thin on potential opportunities will likely dilute performance on other contracts. All right, so provided it is in your primary competencies, what are the reasons to respond?
First off, responding helps you get noticed and build relationships. If you're relatively new to government contracting, responding helps you by introducing your company to government buyers and program officials who need your services or products, and it helps to foster relationships. Second, it helps the government decide upon set-asides. And if you write an impressive response, you could potentially be awarded a sole source contract. But at a minimum, you're hoping to structure the final statement of work and reduce competition for the award by limiting the bidders through a set-aside. Third, this is your opportunity to market your firm directly to an interested customer. And as a result, you will demonstrate that you are a subject matter expert, or SME, to that agency and someone that they can reach out to for further advice or discussion. Remember, you're not just a small business. You are and should strive to be a trusted advisor. Fourth, any accompanying draft requirements can provide you with early insight into the government's needs and can help you to understand the full picture of what the agency is looking for, providing you with valuable insight to plan accordingly. And finally, write your response as though it is a competition and one that you want to win. By this, I mean treat your response as a sales document. This is your opportunity to sell yourself while providing information to the government. Stress in your reply, whether directly asked by the government or not, any socioeconomic category that you qualify for. And demonstrate that you are a subject matter expert by focusing on your primary competencies. And remember, this is not an RFP, so don't worry or even respond to anything you may not be particularly good at, as you do not have to respond during this process to everything listed in that RFI or sources sought.
Great information, but before we go, any final thoughts you would like to leave with our listeners?
Yes, by responding to RFIs and sources sought in your primary competencies, you are increasing your visibility to the federal client and keeping your company's name on the minds of both contracting and program staff, as these responses are typically viewed by not just the government buyers, but by their program level counterparts and directors.
Excellent. That's going to wrap up today's episode. Frank, thanks again, and we will see you next time. This concludes this week's episode of FedBiz 5, where you get informed, get connected, and get results. Today's podcast is sponsored by FedBiz Access, government contracting made simple. Visit them at fedbizaccess.com or contact them at 888-299-4498.